What if I told you there's an actual science to being liked? Well, today we're going to unpack 2 decades of research from Harvard all about what makes a great conversation, and we're going to turn it into a simple framework you can start using the second this explainer's over. Let's dive in. Okay, so let's start with a really simple idea. We spend a huge chunk of our lives just talking, right? It feels like the most natural thing in the world. So why is it that so many of our conversations just fizzle out or end in awkward silence or some kind of misunderstanding? Well, it turns out there's a hidden complexity that we almost never think about. And this really gets to the heart of it. Harvard behavioral scientist Alison Wood Brooks, who's the source for all this, she puts it perfectly. I mean, think about it. Our entire lives, from our careers to our friendships, they all hinge on the quality of our conversations. The stakes, they're actually incredibly high. So if talking is that important, why are we, so bad at it a lot of the time? Well, Professor Brooks explains that even though talking feels super easy on the surface, our brains are actually running one of their most complex programs under the hood. And it's right there in that hidden complexity that things tend to go off the rail. But here is the really good news. There is a solution. Professor Brooks has spent her entire career developing a system to help us navigate all that complexity. It's a really powerful framework that basically turns the art of conversation into a science that you can actually learn and repeat. And she calls it the TALK framework. It's designed to be this super simple, memorable roadmap that can guide you through pretty much any conversation you can think of, whether you're talking to a coworker, an old friend, or even on a first date. So here it is, TALK. It's built on 4 key pillars: topics, asking, levity, and kindness. We're going to break down each one, starting right at the foundation, with T for topics. All right, so T is for topics. And the first big idea here is realizing that topics are literally the building blocks of a conversation. And the best conversationalists, they don't just randomly stumble into good topics. They actually choose them strategically. And Professor Brooks has this great visual for the topic pyramid. Now, here's the mistake most of us make. We spend way too much time at the bottom, at the base, stuck in that generic small talk about the weather or what we did last weekend. And look, small talk is a necessary starting point for sure, but the real goal is to start climbing, moving from that small talk to more tailored topics, and then finally up to deep talk. That's the peak. That's where the real connection happens. Okay, so how do you actually climb that pyramid? Well, that brings us perfectly to the next letter, A, which stands for asking. The research is crystal clear on this. Asking really good questions is the engine that drives a conversation from the shallow end to the deep end. Honestly, the single best piece of advice for most people is just ask more questions. Simple as that. But the real secret sauce, the thing that separates a good conversation from an unforgettable one, is mastering the follow-up question. And to do that, we have to avoid something called the boomerang question. You know what I'm talking about. It's when you ask a question like, oh, where are you from? Just so you can immediately jump in and talk about where you're from. It's a question that just boomerangs right back to you. Instead, a follow-up question digs deeper. It's like, oh, what's it like there? Or what do you love about that place? It shows you're genuinely curious about their world, not just waiting for your turn to talk. And you might think this is a small thing, but the impact is, wow, it's huge. There was this study of over 1,000 speed daters, right? And they found that the people who asked just one single extra follow-up question were way more likely to get a second date. Just one. And why is that? Because a follow-up question is the ultimate proof that you're actually listening. It makes the other person feel heard. It makes them feel valued. That's the power of one good question. So you can have the perfect topics, you can ask amazing questions, but if the conversation doesn't have any warmth, it's just not going to create a real connection. And that's where we get to the emotional core of this whole framework, L for levity and K for kindness. Now, this is really interesting. Professor Brooks says the biggest enemy of most conversations isn't what you'd think. It's not disagreement or conflict. It's just plain old boredom. Our minds wander. It's what they do. So levity, which is really about warmth and humor, is the antidote to that. And one of the best warmth moves you can make is something called the callback. Let's say someone mentioned their dog, Max, earlier in the conversation. Bringing it up later, like, hey, how's Max doing, by the way? That is pure conversational gold. It's another one of those signals that proves you were paying attention. And then there's kindness, which is especially powerful when you disagree with someone. Our first instinct is usually to just argue the facts, right? To prove them wrong. But instead, try this amazing phrase from the research. Just say, it makes sense that you feel that way about this. See what it does? You're not agreeing with their facts. You're just validating their feeling. It's this incredibly disarming move that can stop an argument in its tracks and turn it back into a real conversation. All right, so let's zoom out and put all these pieces together. The TALK framework, as you can see, isn't just some abstract theory. It is a practical, honest-to-goodness toolkit that is designed to change the way you interact with people, starting today. So here it is, the whole strategy in one place. You start with T for topics, moving up that pyramid, then A for asking, using follow-up questions to go deeper, not those boomerang questions. Then you sprinkle in L for levity, that warmth and humor to fight off boredom. And you use K for kindness to keep the conversation going, even when you disagree. See how it all connects? These aren't just vague tips. They are concrete, repeatable actions that let you turn this abstract social skill into a craft you can genuinely get great at. Because in the end, that's the big secret this whole framework reveals. Being liked, having great conversations, it's not really about being interesting. It's about being interested in other people. It's about shifting your focus from just talking to truly connecting. So I'll leave you with this question. Whose world are you going to learn about today?